Okay. Would like to call to order the May 25th, 2017 Budget Workshop. Welcome, everyone. We will get right into it. We already have at the table our folks from Cabarrus County Schools for their presentation. Welcome. We're glad to have you today.
Thank you. We appreciate you having us here. And I will say, just start off, that Mr. Shoemaker, our school board chair, could not be here tonight. Had a personal issue that he had to deal with, but certainly wanted to express to everyone here that how much he appreciates the relationship between the school board and the county commissioners and our county relationship, and that he thought, that was very positive, and wanted to make sure that we started out the meeting by saying that, since he couldn't be here.
Thank you.
So we have a very brief presentation. We just want to make sure we go through. We usually have begun by starting and telling you our budget development process is a pretty involved process that officially begins about December, whenever that starts. It really goes on all year long, and Ms. Klutz obviously puts a lot of work into that and does a great job, and we certainly appreciate everything that she puts into that. But the committee that works with that is a pretty large committee that has a lot of stakeholders that are involved, and you can see that we have about 25 members on that budget committee. We have 2 school board members, 5 members of the county, which again we're very thankful that are part of that committee. So Ms. Dubois is a part of that, Susan Farrington, Kristen, Diane Honeycutt was there, I think, all but one of the meetings, and Mr. Billifer was at a couple of those to kind of help. Then we also have parent stakeholders. We have 6 members from our schools, which are principals, teachers, and a TA. And then we also have kind of our district leadership that are all part of that committee. And we use a process called the TRIGO process to prioritize, which pretty much is 4 full days of working on that to prioritize and go through the needs of a $300 million budget. So we're very proud of that process. It's not always the fastest process, but it does get us to a really good place with a lot of stakeholder input, and we're really proud of that. So to get right into budget requests, we're beginning with the continuation request, and again, just want to start out by saying that is, in essence, the amount of money that it takes to keep us at the same level that we're at now, continue when you're talking about operating expenses, benefit increases, matches for state salary. And again, this is another thing that we're very appreciative of Cabarrus County for starting with us to know and understand that expansion means there's more cost. And so we begin by knowing that, yeah, we're gonna be where we're at. That's essentially $2.1 million to stay where we're at and continue by adding staff and adding benefit changes and things that just kind of take to continue having school. Our expansion requests, our teacher supplement is our #1 priority. Asking for teaching allotment positions and mental health responders. Those are the 3 highest priorities that we had or prioritized through our TRIGO process. And again, right now, our #1 priority is to increase our teacher supplement to get that to the state average. And when I began as the superintendent, that was one of the things that we talked about and discussed. And Mr. Downs and Ms. Dubois have set up a plan with us from the beginning to get to that point. We're actually a little bit ahead of that plan where we are now. So again, that's our #1 priority, and we appreciate the planning to help us get there. Again, that was our #1 priority, and then we had teacher allotments and mental health responders below that. Next request is technology request. I think it says there $128,000 is continuation. About $1.5 million is to expand, and again, if we're growing about 1,000 students a year, that's to give us more devices. When you get 1,000 more students and 1,000 more devices, it's also trying to figure out how we continue to keep students that are in grades 3 through 12 to have a computer each day that they can work on that's assigned to them, but also be able to maintain those things as we expand each year. Our building and grounds maintenance requests, again, equipment, monitor and manage environmental conditions, staff development. These are all the things that we have moving forward, and sometimes can be larger. Again, we've had a plan and an amount of money that the county has allotted for that to continue with ongoing maintenance issues that we had never had before. That's been very helpful in those areas. And then our last major request is really charter school expansion. And as you guys know, we're in essence just a pass-through for charter schools. So if there are X amount of students, in this case, what's the number that we're projected for next year? I should have that. In this case, what we think, based on the best information that we have, is about 512 more students. And so therefore, that's to get the amount of money that 512 more students will actually cost given to us, so it can pass right through and be given to charter schools, and that's the local amount for that. So again, that's something that we've worked really hard with to make sure that the county understood where that request came from and how it affected our budget, since it has to be a pass-through for them. There's obviously a lot more detail involved that we can go through with any of the issues or any of the categories that are listed. And the whole budget request or the whole document, we have a link that's listed there because it's always out for anyone to see if they want to. Again, I'll just say we can answer specific questions. I don't want to be redundant and repeat information. We've been working on the budget since, as I said, December and January, and very closely with your budget staff and Mr. Downs. And again, we just want to reiterate that we feel like we have a great relationship with both of them, that they are very open with us to say, here's where we're at, here's what we think. Since I've begun as the superintendent, I've never been surprised by a situation. We certainly hope we reciprocate that, and when something comes that we don't understand, then I pick up the phone and call Mr. Downs and/or Ms. Dubois, and they do the same. And so we are very, very thankful to have a relationship where we feel like is a trusting relationship that we're not surprised. Now, there's never probably going to be enough money in the demands that people ask for, and you guys have the unenviable task of figuring out how to pay everybody's or pay for everything that happens in the county. But we're certainly thankful that we have a relationship where we don't get surprised. And you know, we wish sometimes there was more money, but we have not been, everything that we have dealt with has been a reasonable answer and understanding, and give us enough information that we understand it. So if it's a spreadsheet this long that sits down and explains where that is and what that 5-year plan from, we've spent many a day and many a meeting looking at that, and then us to walk away from the table and say, well, we understand that, and we understand how they're planning to get it in there. Lots of places don't have that situation or relationship, and so we very much appreciate that.
So before you is a spreadsheet.
Pam, let me ask the question, Chris, real quick.
Certainly.
On the technology there, how are we doing on the ratios of, devices per student?
Yeah, I alluded to that and didn't do a good job at all, so I appreciate you asking me that. Right now, in grades 3 through 12, all students have their own device, meaning like there are more devices than there are students in all buildings 3 through 12. Most of our K-2 classrooms are not interested in having a laptop for a kindergartner, for example. So most of the time they're on a 2-to-1 basis. So there's one iPad for every 2 students, because again they're not using a device all day long. And in essence, that's all we need. There may come a time that it would be different, but right now it's about 1 to 2 K2, and we're essentially 1-to-1 devices 312. We just don't let the students take the computers home, so they're supposed to have them all day long. Now, that doesn't mean that a student necessarily has a laptop in PE. So when we say that, it doesn't mean that there's a laptop there for them to pull out in PE. If they were going to health class, they may have one to use, but when we say that 1-to-1, it means we have more computers there than we have students in 312. We made a lot of gains in those areas in the last few years with part of the lease purchases that these guys have worked on, and Chromebooks have certainly made that much cheaper to be able to give that to students. And primarily, we don't have anyone that's complaining and say that a $250 Chromebook doesn't get the job done. So we're in very good shape, as long as we just need to keeping up with expansion. That's primarily our challenge right now.
Well, there's not many school systems in the state can say that, because a lot of them are 3-to-1, 4-to-1, that kind of thing. One computer to every 3 or 4 students. And I remember when I was on the school board, we were striving to get to 1-to-1, and I'm just glad to hear that we are there. And then, like you said, on the K2, if you got a 2-to-1 match, that's still good.
Right. And when the other part we're doing is we're expanding teachers too. So teachers, we do want to be able to give a laptop for obvious reasons to be able to take home and use, and that really does need to be a little bit more robust than a Chromebook, because it's essentially everything that they're doing and teaching with. So those are not $250 computers. They're obviously bigger and more expensive and supposed to last 4 or 5 years to do all of their work. But again, that's part of our plan, and we feel good about where we are right now with that.
Okay, so you have a spreadsheet in front of you for it's labeled preliminary budget, and it has all the requests that the school systems had requested this year. We have, as a county, met the continuation request. We did something new this year during the Trago budget process, in that with the buildings, grounds, and technology, we have added continuation to those 3 functions, because they have kind of fallen behind in the past years. But as you add new facilities, you need to continue to have more maintenance and stuff for grounds, mowing the grass and things like that, and technology, the increase in units, if that's possible. But we added continuation money for buildings, grounds, and technology so we can meet those needs. We were unable to meet the growth in the teacher supplement. However, with the proposed increase from the state budget, we did increase the supplement, so we didn't go backwards.
That's right.
So our goal was to stay at least steady at where we were at. So we were able to meet those specific needs. We had a little bit of money remaining, and we focused on the buildings and grounds, the buildings area. Custodial equipment for the last 4 or 5 years has been discussed in the budget meetings, and we wanted to establish some money for reoccurring to be able to replace equipment in that area. Provided funding for a utility technician, and then we increased the FMD funding from $882,000 to $900,000. The other factor is that the charter school students are funded currently at the 2,075 student level, and we have 630 students worth of funding in contingency waiting to find out what the second month count is, so that we can shore that up when we get into November. So if it stays in the 500, we're going to be in great shape. If it goes above that, we might be a little scary, but we have 630 students waiting to figure out what that true count is sitting in contingency. And so this spreadsheet was provided last year, and I thought it was very beneficial to give you exactly what was funded. We added an additional sheet this year because we did a lot of funding in March in preparation for this school year. And for Cabarrus County Schools, we provided the funding for 10 buses, for mobile units, and for lift and records for about $3.4 million. And so that money was provided so they would be prepared when the school system actually opens up this year, so that they could get those ordered before the kids came into the classroom. So we wanted to make sure that the public was aware that those fundings were also provided, because as you see on the screen, that there was request for buses, and we did meet that need. So, and when we go through Kannapolis City Schools, their requests are also on here, and we provided funding for the Carver renovation to convert it over to an elementary school, and for the 5 buses that they need for their new middle school. And then the community college is also listed. But we just wanted you to have this information so you would know what you did back in March and what you're proposing to do right now, so that data would be in front of you in case you had any additional questions.
Thank you. Other questions, commissioners? I had one on the charter school, the 512 number. Is that what you anticipate that to increase by next year?
Yeah, so that's a difficult number. So for the
Right.
last, 5 years, it's almost kind of been a number like this. But this past year, so we're all kind of trying to get our arms around it, DPI provided the growth in each charter school, or their projected or anticipated growth in each charter school. Well, based on those numbers, I went back to historical and said, well, if this charter school, 50% of their population goes to that charter school from Cabarrus, then I can reasonably expect that 50% of the growth would go to that charter school. And that's how I got that number.
Right.
It seems a little high. I'm hoping that, maybe 100 will go and 400 will come to us.
Right.
But that's how that number was calculated.
Yeah, and I think, for the benefit of the public, that does end up being a net number.
It does.
Some students leave the traditional public school and go to charter, while others leave the charter and come back. And then I guess some of them age out also. As you had explained earlier, hence a large growth number in high school students, because do any of the charter schools offer high school?
They do. Most of them are actually out of our county. They're more in Mecklenburg County. We actually have a few now in Cabarrus that may only have a 9th grade or a 10th grade with pretty small numbers.
Right.
But even if they attend high school in Mecklenburg County, the money actually goes with them to Mecklenburg County. So
Right.
there are several that are pretty large in Mecklenburg County that we may lose 50 or 60 students to, and we've shared that information to show you these are, this charter school, even though they live in Cabarrus County, they actually travel all the way 2 counties over sometimes, depending on how that is. So
Right.
it is important, I think, to know that it's a guess on how that
Right.
will work, but one that we spend a lot of time making sure that the county staff understood our guess, and I think we all agreed that, yeah, this is a reasonable way to get there, because
Right.
it can be difficult, and to at least put that in the budget and understand, here's how we're guessing, and as Ms. Dubois said, she kind of loaded that up. We may be a little bit wrong. We hope you are. We hope no students move to charter school and that they're all going to Cabarrus County schools, and we'll have to find a place for them, but we definitely want to find a place for them, but it's our best guess based on the
Right.
information that we have.
Well, I think one of the keys is not only you find a place, there is a place for them.
That's
We
right.
have to take them. So as the, for the general public to know, that seat's there whether they come or not. And those costs, there's costs associated with that. So it's very convoluted, but.
If a charter school closes tomorrow, then they're coming to us, and we have to be ready to take
That's
them
right.
that day, so that's a great point.
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily true in the reverse, so.
Yeah, and I think most people don't really understand that we have to have those, we can't wait until they decide, and they don't have to give any advance notice.
That's
We've got to be prepared
That's correct,
that day, as you stated.
yes.
Yeah. Okay, other questions? It's not like this is the first time we've talked about most of these issues, and it is a year-long process. Well, and I would like to echo what you said earlier, and I spoke with Chairman Shoemaker on the phone earlier today. Having the ability to sit down together at the table and discuss these issues and be very open and honest with your needs and our resources really is important in making this process work. And I think that that's something that probably the majority of the counties in North Carolina do not enjoy, that type of working relationship. So we've got a common goal, and that's to provide the best education we can for children in Cabarrus County. And so we certainly appreciate your efforts in helping us to do that. It's a two-way street for sure. It doesn't work if both of us aren't on the bus. Okay, well, we thank you very much.
Thank you very much, we appreciate it.
And we will now move on to item 3, which is presentation from Kannapolis City Schools. And we are happy to have Superintendent Dr. Chip Buckwell with us.
Greetings. I'm going to sound like a broken record for a minute, but I also think what you just said, Mr. Chairman, was exactly correct. I think the transparency that's obvious and evident in the room, that we go through this process together. It's not like there's we're not going down it even on parallel lanes. We're going down the process together, and it makes a big difference in how we all approach the spending of tax dollars in Cabarrus County. And we couldn't do this without the leadership, administrative leadership in Cabarrus County government, nor the relationships we have with the county commissioners. So we all are grateful for both of those things. Welcome. Oh, you're good. I was talking to Will about the process, and really it is a year-long process. It goes on almost every week in cabinet and then going forward from there. So we're constantly dealing with budget and how it works and how it affects us, because the state legislature and the federal government and all the little, you don't think about all the ripples that things cause when something comes down the pipe, but it ripples from the federal level and it ripples from the state level. And obviously, it's a big ripple here with the Cabarrus County budget. So thank you guys for working with us and helping us out. I will defer if you would like to go through the packet, but I can take it through it pretty quick.
Sure, I'll do it.
All right.
Thank you all for allowing us to be here today and present our request. The request looks similar as to years in the past. Starts off with our board. Goes to facilities and grounds. I have provided some additional information to Mr. Bois about kind of what the priority and the years that we need it of these projects in. I will tell you, I'll pick out one, and that is the paving at, it's listed at A.L. Brown, that's where most of it is. Some of it's at Fred L. Wilson. Those, if you're familiar with A.L. Brown, are the big parking lots that are across the street near Trinity Church. They are in bad shape. That's where all of our juniors, seniors park. That's where we park all of our activity buses. And that's also some parking for visitors in central office. We're in dire need of replacing those. If you ever by there, stop and look, you can see big waves in them. The other piece of that is probably at Fred L. Wilson, our parent drive. It's really embarrassing to have our parents have to drive on that. It's down to dirt in a lot of places. That's in desperate need of being replaced. So if I had to put pick one project and say that's something that we really have to have this coming year, that would be it, would be the paving projects in the system. That's not to take away anything from the other projects. They're also needed, but not to the level that the paving is. And I think the paving, if you add it all up, is $1.5 million, I believe. But as you can see, we have other projects, Dale Brown, Carver, the old Carver building, Forest Park Elementary, Fred L. Wilson. A lot of these are deferred maintenance, and I also gave that breakdown to Mr. Blood between deferred and new. Comes up to a total of 21 million, just a little over $21 million. Any questions on that piece?
Real quick, at the bottom of the first page, what's
Okay.
that number?
Sorry.
The grading, ADA, the page number's kind of jumbled in.
It's one. It's
1 million.
One?
Mm-hmm.
And Will, I can vouch for the parking lot at A.L. Brown up there, because I'm up there every month, and it's in bad shape. It's got ripples, and it's got grass growing through it in some places, and I've thought in the back of my mind if that was going to be one of your projects. And the only other question that I would have related to this is, I'm sure that you have a list somewhere that shows how many of these have been on a list and for whatever reason got bumped, primarily no funding. And so has it been 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or more years that some of these projects have been on a request list?
I'll take the paving, for example. It's been on for at least 4 or 5. And it's just such a high amount that it's one of those projects that's kind of hard for us to fund, because we're never going to receive enough capital money to do that project. It's going to have to be a special allocation from y'all to be able to do that. So that's one of the things with a lot of these projects. Now, some of these within the $28,000, $33,000, $40,000 range, yeah, we try to pick those off when we can with just our capital allocations. But when you get up to $1 million or $500,000, we're just never going to receive that unless it's a special, allocation from you. So, a lot of the projects that you see in here that are above that range have been on here numerous years. So. Okay, I'll move on to technology. technology is going very, very well. We appreciate the county helping us with our lease program the last few years. That has been able to help us provide devices for, I believe it's one-to-one at the middle school. Right?
Well, it's the same as Dr. Louder was explaining. It's not, we don't let them take them home, but it's equivalent of one-to-one at the middle school through, it's not quite one-to-one at the high school, but as Dr. Louder was explaining also, a physical education class doesn't require a set of computers in it. So it's in essence a one-to-one, but they're not taking them home. And then K-5, we have a Chromebook and iPad, different devices for different uses in those areas. And it's not nearly one-to-one, but it is, at this point, as sufficient as it can be with growth, what we'd look at. But very similar to the situation with Cabarrus County Schools.
So that program's been very successful for us, and we would ask that that continue. Last year, we were able to take a big bite out of our, what we call technology capital outlay needs with some one-time funding that we were able to use last year. So we basically cut that in half down to $350,000. So we have about $350,000 left in that. Also, while we're on technology, it's not in here, but I just want to, throw a plug in for our partnership with the county. We did look at some things this year. We are in a cost-cutting, saving situation in our school district, but we would certainly like to continue that relationship with the county, albeit that we're requesting at a smaller rate. So I just wanted to put that out there also. Current expense. Continuation with everything that's going on and everything that we've been through the last year. It's been a challenging year for us. For continuation, we're just asking that if we can just keep what we have and request any increase in salaries and benefits. So that's what we would request of the county. I got a little breakdown of charter schools. This changes, all the time. I don't know if this is what it will look like next year. I have looked at some projections for next year, and the Kannapolis Charter School is projecting its enrollment at the max of, I think it's 980. I don't know if they will reach that enrollment or not, but if they do, it would certainly change these numbers. I think that's the only charter school that we deal with that has a potential of having any kind of change that would be, noticeable. But we will have to keep an eye on that one. But as it breaks down right now, for Cabarrus, it's 354 students, and for Rowan, it's 42 students. So, and for expansion, most of our expansion revolves around our opening of our new school and the reconfiguration in the district. And that's for a PE dance teacher, a chorus and theater teacher, and these are at our magnet school, which it will be George Washington Carver. It used to be Kannapolis Intermediate Schools. We're changing that grade configuration. 3 custodians, which will be at the new middle school. Instructional materials, that's to help open the new middle school and to start the 2 magnet programs. And the WAN land engineer, $65,000, which may or may not be needed depending on what the county decides as far as our relationship is with the technology contract. So all that totals $440,000. Any questions on our request?
On the expansion, those are listed in priority?
Look just again to make sure. Yes. Mm-hmm. They are. Mm-hmm. The PE dance, chorus, theater, 3 custodians are pretty critical. I mean, we can't open the new building without having the custodians to maintain it, and then the 2 teachers are critical to operating the magnet programs the way they should be operated, and for the new programs.
And you said both of those positions are at Carver Elementary, is that how you're referring to it?
Carver Elementary, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm not sure who this question's for. It might be Pam, it might be Mike, it might be you. But on the facilities and grounds, is this just the list of everything that you guys currently think needs to happen? Or is this number reflected in what you've given us in our big book? I may not have caught that or realized that when reading through the big.
That's their exhausted list.
Okay. Okay, so, and just, it's by school, but the list per school, is that in any kind of priority order?
The number over to the right-hand side.
The number over to the right-hand side, and that's, if you look, like,
Oh.
A.L. Brown has one,
I
a
didn't
lot of
notice it.
EPAs.
Okay. I
But then
didn't
it has
notice there was a
one,
column.
and
Priority.
to give you an idea, we sat down with Cabarrus County Maintenance, and they walk through all of our schools, and we sit down and do a list of priorities, and it's by building and by grounds. So if you see two number ones, that's why one of them is probably a grounds number one of them is probably a building number one. So,
Okay.
and we just do an exhaustive list with them of everything that we have, so.
Okay. No, yeah, I wanted to make sure I understood what I was looking at.
Right. And so that list is in a perfect world. If we had all the money that we needed, that would be the list.
That would be the list, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You think we'll ever get there?
I hope.
That'd be nice.
I hope. I always, because we give this exact same document to Rowan County, and they always call me every year and say, "Are you asking for $21 million?" And I said, "No, I give that to both counties." And if you want to fund the $21 million, this is what I tell them. We'd be happy, but we're not expecting you to fund $21 million.
Well, going back to our previous discussion about the fact that this is a year-long process and we do communicate regularly, and I had a newspaper reporter ask me yesterday, were you terribly surprised at the request from Kannapolis City Schools? And I said, no, I wasn't. And I think that's because we do talk about it all throughout the year, and no surprises. Okay, other questions for Mr. Crabtree or Dr. Buckwolf? All right, well, we thank you very much.
Thank you for the time.
And the 439 that we've funded already for Carver, is that that's some of the ones that are on their list, right? Or is that other?
That was to convert it from the middle school, the bathrooms had to be shorter and, because
They didn't include any of the other list. Okay, but
So,
That stuff's new and different from that.
yeah. Yeah, we're ahead of schedule. So.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Glad.
Missed you guys.
okay.
Ready?
We have some time now. RCCC has been notified, so we're going to go ahead and jump ahead a little bit and let Kristen go through her list of changes to date.
Sure. So if you guys could reference the attached spreadsheet handed out. Yep, the final changes list. So each year, we like to keep track of the final changes we make or propose after each meeting. So you'll see, I guess that's kind of a salmon color, the after presented to the board at the May 23rd budget workshop that we had Tuesday. We are proposing the following changes you see listed there. So we discussed Cabarrus Health Alliance reducing that nurse position to part-time. So you're seeing the reduction of $26,000 there. The next item is an increase to Lomax Farm. So originally, when we presented the budget, $35,000 was proposed, and there was a decision to bump them back up to $40,000. So that's that $5,000 listed. And then we went through FY18's budget where we had some, where we received additional money for Medicaid hold harmless money, that we are going to go ahead and buy furniture for the following departments you see listed there. So therefore, we could remove those items from FY18's budget. So you can still see the total fund changes is at $32,600 with, and if we were to make these changes, the new general fund total would be $246,653,085. And so that takes the unallocated total to $43,118 after making all of those changes.
And the second half of that Medicaid hold harmless will be on your June agenda for the funds for the furniture purchases that we're taking out of FY18 and placing into FY17. And we may be able to do a little bit more work as we go through, but we kind of ran out of time, and this is as far as we got. Yep.
Are there any questions?
Yes,
I have
ma'am.
one, and I'm sorry, I apologize. I probably should have asked on Tuesday, and you may very well have said it, and I just don't remember. For that school nurse position, why is it part-time and not a full-time? I mean, it's at Mary Frances Wall Center, is that not correct? I mean, do they have different hours?
Mr. Downs can answer that.
can-
Yeah, I just can't remember what
Yeah,
it said.
it was supposed to be split between the Mary Frances Wall and the Head Start program, and Head Start is no longer administered by the school system, so.
Okay, because I thought their hour, I mean, I don't know what the hours are at Mary Frances Wall, but that was I was just wondering if was it somebody that's going to be there, like, I don't know, 4 hours in the morning each day, or they're going to be there just a couple days, or is there really going to be somebody there the whole time it's open versus, but we only having to fund part of it? So I guess that's where my confusion was.
Right,
Does that
it
make?
was-
Yeah,
yeah, it was
the level
be-
of service
It was
that's gonna
gonna
be
be split
provided.
between both schools. I did talk to Dr. Pilkington with the changes in the Head Start program. He felt that the number of children, and based on historical needs, that he recommended the half position. That would be sufficient to cover Mary Frances Wall.
Okay, and I believe you completely. I think that's a fairly high-need population, and I was just trying to understand why it was half and not
Sure.
a whole, but that's fine. I appreciate the explanation.
Okay.
So how many students are there at Mary Frances Wall Center? Does anybody know?
I don't know.
And I'm sure it's a much smaller number than,
Well, I mean, it's preschool age.
right?
But, do you remember anything?
No, I don't. It's small.
I'm thinking that it's a smaller number than a school, but they're still there all day long.
Right.
And you have some students who are going to be high needs and maybe some that aren't. I don't know enough about it to answer that, but I guess what I was wondering is, or maybe you can find this out, what's their current level of service? So is somebody there right now every morning for 4 hours?
Oh.
And then do they have a backup and I'm sorry, the superintendent already left before I thought to ask the question. So then afterwards, is there, I don't know, a principal or somebody that's trained to step in if they had something going on, or they're there Monday, Wednesday, and Friday? I don't have a clue. I'm just trying to understand the half position versus the whole position, and I trust that that's what's needed as a half position.
I can tell you that Dr. Louder requested that it remain a full-time position. However, again, since the position is housed in the Health Alliance, that Dr. Pilkington thought that based on the needs and based on what they had projected plans for the future year, that he thought that the half position was sufficient. So, but we'll get these numbers back to you.
So the half position is maintaining what we have now. Is that correct?
I don't think so. I don't think there is one there.
There's
now.
not one there at all now?
Correct.
Okay, so we're actually.
I understood that there was a part-time one there
Yeah.
currently.
I think the the Head Start program was taking care of it, and then the funding was reverted to us this year. There was, or some grant, something was paying for the position last year, and then this year the request was for us to take over the cost of the position, and that position was split between two buildings, two different schools.
Yeah, the full funding was going to be between two schools. So there, I don't believe there was one last year, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. Because if it was, then it's not a new position, it's just new funding. They've asked for a
And I
new
guess that's,
position.
once you get
So,
information, we'll know. If there was already a half there and they're asking for a half, that makes a whole. If the needs really are only for a half, then that makes sense. I would like to, and I'm fully aware that the nurses are housed through the Health Alliance. However, if you can get feedback from the superintendent as far as any data they might have on the need for the school nurse there, I don't have the answer at all, and I know I'm just rambling, but
Sure.
I just want to make sure that if there is a real need there, then we need to think about it. If there is the need for a half position, and the half position is perfectly fine with everybody, then I'm fine with that too.
We'll get that to you tomorrow.
I just don't know.
Yeah, we'll talk with both Dr. Louder and Dr. Pilkington.
Okay. Right. Okay, well, we are way ahead of schedule, which is not a bad thing. But we have got actually an hour until the community college is scheduled to be here.
Chris, anything else you can move up?
I do have another spreadsheet that we can go over. So it's the Cabarrus Economic Development Corporation spreadsheet, and it's just an updated spreadsheet from what they presented on Tuesday. The overall funding amount remains the same. There was just some shift in line items, so we just wanted to give you this so it was accurate and updated. I can try to answer any questions that you may have.
The red's the line items that changed?
No, sir.
So-
We were, there, the salary and benefit area was predominantly where the changes were made. They'd given you a preliminary form instead of the final document. We got in touch with the accountant today, Mike and I did, and had a conversation because we couldn't tie some numbers back and we had the wrong form, but the budget still in whole is the same number. It's just been, the money's been moved between different line items. So we wanted to make sure you had a copy of the final one that actually matched the salary and benefit numbers.
Well, shoot, I was hoping that was going to chew up a lot more time than that.
Well, and the question that I would have is how does our proposed budget, for example, how much of this on these facilities and grounds that Kannapolis City Schools had submitted $21 million, how much of that have we budgeted to cover? Like, for example, the parking lot issues that they are concerned about.
They have, last year, we gave them $117,000 for their smaller type projects, as Will was referring to, that he could handle with that.
Right.
Plus, they receive $100,000 in capital. The monies that we gave them towards major projects this year on that small sheet, and that was to renovate Carver and to buy the buses for the middle school. So those were
allocations we made mid-year.
we
right?
made those in March, April-ish
Yeah.
timeframe, but that's the money that we had available to allocate, and that was the greater need at that point in time.
The other items on that list are part of the deferred maintenance that we've discussed a couple of times that's outstanding out there that for future, sometime in the future, we will need to start addressing.
And to that point, we need to start addressing, we don't know how we're addressing that yet, correct? We just know we need to get into it and start it. Do y'all have something in mind?
That's correct. You will need to look for additional revenues, additional revenue sources. The growth is keeping up, but with the need for new schools, that it continues to take up most of that growth. So we're going to need to look at alternatives. You have talked about potentially the sales tax, and then the other option is property tax.
And as we discussed on Tuesday, that potential quarter-cent sales tax that could be used for capital needs, this would be one of those projects. It could be, of course, we could use it for debt service on the new buildings we're building, but we could also
Could also use it for.
for some of these, which as we've discussed, is a tax that will be largely paid by folks from outside the county that come here to shop, and would help us to keep the tax rate flat, rather than having to increase the property tax rate to cover these projects.
Well, and increasing the property tax rate is a penny, you said was 2.1 something.
About 2.1 million.
Yeah. So 211 million and a penny at 2.1. So I think we better try to find other avenues.
Well, yeah, and I think that quarter-cent sales tax, was it 7 million?
7 million, yeah.
Estimated
Yeah. So-
that would produce annually, which would go a long way towards knocking down some of these projects. I mean, like, for example, if the Parent Drive at Fred L. Wilson is down to dirt, and we've not got additional funds, that's just going to get worse and worse. Which I think that one's down at 125,000, which is not nearly as large as the A.L. Brown, but as Commissioner Shue mentioned, there's some issues there also.
And also, I think that the legislation is making some movement forward on the lottery proceeds, but from, what is it, 200 million a year capped to maybe 300 million, or is it 100 million
It's
capped?
100 million. They're also proposing an additional 75 million, but
It
that
won't-
would not come to, we would not qualify. It would be for the.
Tier 1 and 2.
The lower tier counties, or the lower tier counties.
You know, that tiering system is really, and I mean, we're just talking in general conversation right
Right.
now, but that tiering setup, though, is really not fair, because, we've got municipalities in our county that are not a full Tier 2 or even obviously a Tier 3, which is what we are as a county, Tier 3. And they was talking about some movement on even changing the tiers to maybe a possible Tier 4, which would decrease even more of our funding, because we would at a higher level on the tier.
We were
And that's
right on the
just-
cusp.
And it's not really fair the way they do that. My feelings on it are, if the revenue is generated in Cabarrus County, it needs to come back to Cabarrus County. And, versus having to send money to other areas. And I understand the need, I understand the situation that they're in. But there was probably a time in past that we were there too, but we did something about it. And, and it's been very positive. And the growth and all that we see now is from the efforts of the past. And if you don't never do anything, you can't expect anything to get done. And that's where some counties are. They just, for whatever reason, they don't have the, whether it's, whatever it is, they just don't have it. But I don't think it's the counties, individual counties, it's particularly the ones that's doing well, to make up for the ones that's not doing good. And that's just my 2 cents on it, but I just wish it was more fair.
Well, I think you'll certainly find agreement around the table here on that.
Have an update on the Mary Frances Wall. There is currently a nurse there half-time. That nurse was split between the two, and since Head Start is no longer funding the other half of that nurse, Dr. Pilkington, again, with my conversations with him, based on the numbers of this current year or last year, he thought that the half a position was sufficient to cover the needs at Mary Frances Wall. Again,
Okay, so there's
Dr.
currently a
Lowder-
half, and that lost the funding, so this is just,
no, it was a full, half was Mary Frances Wall, half was the Head Start.
Head
Half of
Start,
that
where's
salary-
Head Start is located where?
At Long School.
Okay,
It wa-
so that's what I mean.
Yeah, it is.
That's
Yeah.
what he's saying.
Oh,
So,
yes, that's right. That
so
is.
this is funding the current, this was new way to fund the current half position that's at Mary Frances Wall?
No.
Because they're getting rid of the half position that would have been at,
Yeah, it was fully funded. Half of the funding came from Head Start, half came from the county. Head Start is, the grant from Head Start is no longer coming through Cabarrus County Schools. It is, do what?
Then why are we paying anything? If the county was paying half of it and it's going to continue to be a half position, why are we funding what we already funded?
I'm reading
I
the
understand.
notes right
No,
here.
no, I understand what you're saying.
No, and
I
that's
asked
where-
Kelly, I'm asking Kelly, who paid for that nurse
so,
last year?
there you go, that's what, and I just want to,
Well, my understanding that Head Start paid half of it.
Right, but if we paid
Okay,
the other
well,
half.
Head Start is no longer paying.
Right, but if we paid the other half, then we're continuing to pay that half. So why are we adding another half? That's the confusion, so I asked.
well, so then that question is, if we're paying another half, does that make it a whole?
Yeah, I don't know.
So if originally half of the person's time was at Mary Frances Wall and the other half of their time there was at Long
That's
School.
what it was.
The need at Long School is no longer there.
It's no longer funded. I'm sure there is a need there, but it's being funded through Head Start. Head Start is no longer associated with the school system as of the end of this school year.
Okay.
I agree, I
I
agree
got you,
with
but
what
I
you're
think
saying.
you and I am not communicating very well on where my brain has gone, so
Well,
I'll
I'm
stop.
trying to figure out how we've got the negative number from the spreadsheet. Or the negative number from.
Because it was
Because
funded
the other night, we were
100%.
adding 26, but there were,
It was funded at 100%
And last
in the
month's
proposed
funded
budget,
42 at 48.
with our understanding that Head Start was going to be there to pay half of it through their grants.
but in the paperwork, when it said add nurse at Mary Frances Wall. So, I mean, I guess that's part of where my confusion is. And I think once, whatever this question gets answered, I'll be able to figure it
Yeah.
out. I mean, it'll clear it up, but.
Yeah, I'm trying
that
to
part is what
decipher
I'm a
this
little
writing here, too,
confused about.
Yeah, so we'll have a conversation with Dr. Lowder tomorrow and Dr. Pilkington as well. But again, Dr. Pilkington is recommending that it only needs a half a position.
'Cause
Which
this-
is what it
this is
has been
anecdotal,
all
but
along.
I went
At
home to
Mary
tell
Frances
my
Wall.
wife, who works
I'll tell
at
you
Francis
tomorrow.
Wall. Yeah, part of what my confusion is, and this is just anecdotal, but I went home and told my wife, whose office is at Mary Frances Wall, hey, you guys are getting a nurse. And she said, well, we already have a half of one. And I thought, oh, well, then I don't know what we're doing then. Okay.
So we'll find that out
tomorrow.
So,
What I remember was Cabarrus County Schools was paying for that half, not us. That's what I remember, but that's what I'm trying to confirm.
Okay, so it was, they were paying for it
But, yeah,
with their funds,
so,
and it was going to switch over to the health
so
department.
that's why I'm asking Kelly, to
That's
make
why
sure that
it's
I'm not
showing
losing
up
it, and
as
that's what I
new
remember.
money required.
I didn't mean to get everybody confused, but I'm still confused, so I look forward to all the details, but I have
think-
complete
I
confidence
think
the two of you will get it figured out.
You will have your answer tomorrow.
And we still have 45 minutes.
Yeah,
As a way
Yeah,
of an update, Dr. Spalding is on the road. She had to drive down from the North Campus. She should be here in about 10 minutes. So we've been in touch with her.
Take a quick break now.
yes, yeah. So I think we will take a break and reconvene at 5:15.